full house here. Everybody's expecting to see you. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you for joining us in this first edition of the World Business Forum here in Lima. It's a great pleasure having you here, and to me personally, a great honor to conduct this interview with you for the next hour. So,
thank you. I assure you the honor is mine.
Oh, no. Well, I'm sure you've been telling this story for many years, but I'd like to start from the beginning. Let me go back to the first steps. I'd like you to share with us what were those first steps when Apple was not even a company yet?
Okay, well, Apple had really two starts. First was a little tiny start out of our homes, out of the garage, you might say. Although we didn't run business in the garage, it was the only place we could use it to assemble things and drive them to the local store. And then we had a real start for the real Apple of today with a great product that was going to make a pretty big company, a huge company. So there were really two starts. And Steve and I started out very young. We were in our young 20s. We had no money, we had no savings accounts in the bank, we had no business experience, we had no reason for people to, really think that we were onto anything. The whole idea of a personal computer, I had hit on the formula for how to make a computer the right way and the affordable way and the useful way. I had stumbled on that just basically to show off my engineering skills and all in a group of people who really believed that once we had our own computers, society was going to change. And that was my motivation. Now, Steve Jobs came into town later. He didn't know the computer existed yet. And I took him down to a club of people, and he watched the enthusiasm. And that's when he said, we should start a company. Steve had zero. I was an engineer at Hewlett-Packard. I had an income and an apartment. Steve had zero, and he was always looking for some way to be an important person. He had to someday have a company. So the two of us got together, and we took my first little project, which wasn't even designed by myself as a computer, but a modification into a computer, and we started going towards, we're going to sell a piece for it. We're going to build a piece for $20 and sell it for $40. That simple, that humble. We had no money. But before we ever shipped any of that product, called the Apple I computer, which gave away the formula for today's personal computer, we were demonstrating my Apple II computer, which was really going to start a big company. One of the greatest products ever. It not only was a good, easy-to-use computer right out of the box, which the world had sort of never seen, that could do useful things at an affordable price, but also I believed in fun. I believed in games. I had designed games for Atari, like Breakout, where you hit a ball against bricks, and I believed in that. And the Apple II computer that I designed was the first time ever that arcade games were in color. Up till then, they were being built by companies like Atari, all black and white in big boxes, but they were black and white TVs. It was also the first time ever, my Apple II computer, that arcade games were software. A young 9-year-old with a simple programming language for 9-year-olds called BASIC could sit down and write a game and have colors moving on the screen and write a game in one day. Before that, games were hardware, which meant 100 chips, 150 chips, and thousands of wires that a skilled engineer had to hook up the right way to get signals going. It would take half a year to create a new arcade game before the Apple II computer. So this was a big revolution, and it was worthy enough. Steve Jobs wanted a business so he could be important, do some important things, and me, I just wanted to be a great engineer and create these little products. And for about 5 years leading up to that, once a year, Steve would come into town. Steve Jobs would come into town, see my latest creation turn into money for us, and money was good.
Of course.
So we started Apple, but I was against ever being. I wanted to be a middle-level person my whole life. I had determined when I formed my personality that I just wanted to be in the middle. I didn't want to be poor. I didn't want to be super rich. I didn't want to have any of my values corrupted, which sometimes wealth and power do. You just want more of it. And so I had a little decision to go through in starting Apple as a real company. And my purpose was just to get my computer, my design, get it to the world. But more than that, I just wanted engineers to look it over and say, wow, great engineering. And Steve wanted business and a company, and boy, he did everything in the world possible to make sure that the right things got done, and his thinking was very different than a lot of other people. He was always kind of one step ahead of anyone else.
So maybe we could say that the key to Apple's success was that mix of those two very different personalities, the business mentality of Steve Jobs and your technological excellence.
Yes, and it leaves out a marketing importance. That was the third leg of Apple. And our investor, Mike Markkula, came in to run marketing and explained that marketing was more important than engineering. Our product, the Apple II, would come from engineering, but marketing was understanding people, their needs, the values, how you promote products, how you introduce new products. So Mike Markkula was very important too, and Steve Jobs learned from him the aspects of marketing.
Yeah, well, I guess that when you're starting up, it's very important to have like an angel, like Markkula, in your case. How do you find a personality like that to invest in your dream?
Well, I was not the businessman, so I didn't go out to find an investor. I mean, I don't even want to ever be involved in investments and watching financial numbers. I don't own any stock. I've never used Apple stock app to this day. I like my head to just be free. I can live a life like normal people and be around all levels of life. I don't have to be at the top or the bottom. And Steve Jobs was more the person who went out because he wanted a business so badly. He wanted an investment because now he went from having zero chance of ever being wealthy based on academics and things like that. All of a sudden, he was founder of a company that had big money invested. So how do you find a person like that? Steve Jobs had a personality to just go out and try every avenue, try other companies he knew that might buy us in and make some money, or try a venture capital, and eventually one of them turned him on to this investor, Mike Markkula. Mike Markkula had been an engineer who went into marketing at Intel, the chip maker, and he'd retired early. He had enough Intel stock, and he got out of the business rat race, and he was looking around for interesting things to do. So it was very lucky that we found him, and he believed that we were on to the next big thing.
Well, Steve Jobs had quite a personality. He's an icon now. And could you tell us how was he as a colleague, as a friend, and also as a businessman? You've been tracing a little bit of his character through business for your last words, what you were saying. But how was he as a friend and as a colleague? And did he change a lot after Apple started growing?
Yes. People talk about Steve Jobs 1 and Steve Jobs 2. When he returned to Apple, he was a little more patient and cautious and didn't step on people as much, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell, it can still happen. But I knew Steve Jobs 0, way before all of this, and the first day I met him, I showed him all my Bob Dylan albums and all the liner notes and the strange words of songs, and we would discuss things like the counterculture days and the movements and the philosophies, and he was very kind of liberally minded, like a lot of young people those days. And, we'd go to concerts together. I remember he wanted to attend college at Reed College up in another state, and I drove him there, and I wound up driving about half a dozen times, a long distance, to visit him, met all of his friends and all that. We played pranks, we told jokes, we did all the things young people did, and even back then he would eat things like pizza. And just the way he would talk, was always excited about life, trying to find something, trying to find the clues and the answers. He just didn't have the skills from academics or business yet. So it was very lucky. So close, I tell you, I had a great product in my hand, and I could have gone with any other people, my engineer friends at Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard turned me down 5 times for the personal computer. But my engineer friend said, this is the best product they've ever seen. And maybe somebody else would have said, let's start a company. But Steve Jobs was my loyal friend. I'm so loyal to that. We've been doing little companies with my products for like 5 years. And loyalty is important. I was loyal to Hewlett Packard too. I proposed it to them before starting Apple. They had to turn me down or I wouldn't have done Apple because I loved my company and I wasn't going to do something behind their back.
I'm sure they're regretting those denials.
No, they don't regret it, actually, because I've spoken to the top people, even the vice presidents that signed it all off, and no, you win some, you lose some, you hit and miss. It's hard to tell. Nobody in the big computer world believed that these little small personal computers were going to amount to very much money very much success, big companies. That was very, very doubted.
Well, there might be some entrepreneurs among our audience, and I'd like to touch on that what you were saying right now. You had a steady job at Hero Paco. When's the time to decide to leave that steady job and jump to your dream?
There is no one set time. I have an example in my case. The first of all, just out of college, you don't really have any career, and I decided I wanted to be an engineer for life. I do not want to move up the money scale, the management levels in a company. I want to do what I love doing, hardware and software design. So I'm going to be an engineer for life. And I forget what the question was.
When do you decide
when do you decide?
leave a steady job and...
Okay, well the first most important thing when you're just out of college is pay your apartment rent, right? So working for a real company in the daytime, of course, I was doing engineering, which I loved anyway, so I loved my daytime job. But at night, if you're young and you don't throw your life away and just party and drugs and all these other things, I was so much a geek, I didn't have any chance of a girlfriend. So I had lots of time at night to work on my own projects, and eventually we had a big product, and I had to decide, leave Hewlett-Packard. And I told Steve Jobs, for the big money, I said no. I told Steve Jobs and Mike Markkula, no, I want to be an engineer at Hewlett-Packard for my entire life, because at Hewlett-Packard, we design products that engineers use. I'm an engineer building products for engineers. I know the marketing. And I said, I love designing computers, and I could do that if we start Apple. But I've proven that I can design computers on my own time at home. I've designed 2 computers in a year in mass storage and wrote a basic computer language, and I did all the things I love doing. So I said no at first, and finally a friend convinced me, start this company as Apple Computer, and it's okay to be an engineer for the rest of your life. You do not have to run a company. That went against my ethics and other principles I have. Non-political, I don't want to force other people to do things my way. So then I picked up the phone, called Steve Jobs and said, yep, we're starting.
Okay, and it went really good.
It went well right from the start, because our product was a leader. You know, when you say, oh my gosh, we're ahead of a revolution that's changing the world. That's what we felt, even though the dollars, the money, did not justify that thought for quite a while. It was about a year before we took off. It wasn't as a game machine. The first spreadsheet program just became beloved by small businessmen. Walk into a store and set up your spreadsheets, income categories, expenditure categories, month by month, and make changes and see the results. That all of a sudden shot our sales up 10 times. We were going to be a big company. We were going to go public with an IPO and make big money. So that was a huge step, and Apple was flexible enough to try to follow the market, basically. The business ends of Apple would go in the business market more than the game market. One of our leaders, Trip Hawkins, wanted Apple to continue in strong gaming, but he got turned down, so he left the company and started another company called Electronic Arts. So I was one of the founders of that too. I like games.
So at that point in time, you were already playing with the big boys. When you get to that point in Apple, you were already like a big deal. What was the best and the worst part of defying the big ones? Like at that time, IBM, for example, what was the best part of that, of challenging them? Okay,
let's say we started kind of kicking the ideas around 75, incorporated by 77. By 1980, that shorter time, 77, 1980, we were just huge, the largest number of computers being built per year and sold in the world and all that stuff. Steve Jobs was very worried that big companies like IBM that have resources and have been in the business for a long time would come in and step on us. And Mike Markkula said, no, they have teams of people. And if their people are smart and we're smart, we can do just as good. If you have a market that's going up and you have a good share in the market, be it 50%, be it 90%, whatever, you will grow as the market grows. You'll retain your share. And it didn't actually come true in this case. IBM had so much marketing prowess, reps going into companies and all that, that eventually by about 80, something, maybe 82, 83, 84, even the IBM PC was passing us in market share. So it wasn't something we ever worried about. Apple continually grew because we were opening up new markets, meaning new countries of the world. We were introducing our computer sales into, and we were improving products, and more people were discovering computers can help them in life. They were going into more distributed marketing areas like education. So we were growing anyway. And when you're growing and growing fast, you don't really necessarily pay a lot of attention to, well, we should have had a higher market share. You don't think that way.
But even though you were growing, the company was growing, you decided at a certain point that you wanted to quit, to leave Apple, and you sold most of your stock.
No,
what happened there?
Not true at all.
You didn't?
Steve Jobs sold all but one share when he left.
Okay.
Not I.
You didn't?
No, I'm loyal to Apple for the rest of my life. Who could ever start something so good? And I have never left Apple. I'm the only person who's received a paycheck every week since we started the company.
Okay.
I get a small paycheck to this day, token. I had an airplane crash in 1981. And when I came out of amnesia 5 weeks later, I called up Steve Jobs and told him that the Macintosh team was in great shape for that product. I was on the team. And I said, this is my last chance to go back to the university, Berkeley, and get my degree, my last year of college. And I was going to take it. My name was famous, so I had to use a fake name. And my Berkeley diploma says Rocky Raccoon Clark. So a lot of people said I left Apple, but I stayed on the payroll. I actually spoke at events for Apple and carried on. And after I was done with that year and a little bit more business, I came back to Apple as a senior engineer for some more years. Then I left in 1975 or 6, and I left, and people say, oh, you left because you were unhappy about Apple. No, Steve Jobs made that mistake once and assumed it. But I was not unhappy at Apple. I was unhappy that the Apple II division, where I worked as a senior engineer, they were just getting disrespected by the company, largely because of Steve Jobs. Thought it was Apple II versus his product, the Macintosh. And his product, the Macintosh, was going to make him so famous and it was going to take over the world. That's true. We all believed in that. I believed in that the Macintosh was the future. But he put down the engineers and disrespected them, and they didn't get heard. And I spoke out about that. And so it was thought that I didn't like what was going on at Apple. Not true. I left the company for a startup. Had an idea. This was back in a day when you only had 2 remote controls in your home, a VCR and a TV. There were no remote controls for hi-fis. There were no satellite television being sold yet. There were almost no laser discs in the United States. So I was a rare person who had 5 remote controls thinking, how can I make them into one device? And I had some good ideas of approaches to do that. So I left to start a startup company and build the first universal remote control. What could be more exciting? But I still stayed an employee of Apple too, under all their whatever employee contracts I have.
And what do you feel about Apple as a company today? How do you see its market position now?
I'm unbelievably proud of Apple, even for the past, but I'm also proud of it for the present. After Steve Jobs died, there was a lot of worry. Where is the innovation and the vision and the entrepreneurship and the innovativeness going to come from in Apple? It's all over. And no, because you know what? Steve Jobs, Tim Cook leads Apple now. But when Tim Cook came to Apple, he just really fell in love with the way that Steve Jobs thought, and he absolutely was going to work there. And Tim Cook has done the most amazing things for respecting all the employees. Not saying you're different, you're in groups, but uniting them, caring about people of all different types. We're the first technology company in the United States that there's no difference in salary by gender. Both genders, all genders are paid the same, regardless. So we're the first company, the only company in Silicon Valley to be that way. But it's all these good things for the customers as well, caring about the privacy issues and not saying, oh, we're just going to milk the farm and get everything we can by what people don't know. I mean, look at the Apple credit card comes out. There's not even a number printed on it. And they keep all your numbers secret with special virtual numbers whenever you use your cards. No, this company has just impressed me so much from a humanitarian point of view. And the products, you know, continue to be it's an ecosystem. You kind of have to get in the Apple ecosystem and buy different Apple products, and now branching out to services, but they all work together so well. And that's one thing I'm very proud of. You can kind of be in another ecosystem nowadays, the Android ecosystem, but I just don't like being tracked everywhere I go, so I try to avoid it. I mean, I like to play with products. To me, I like to explore new products, so I still buy even Android phones and play with the newest features and test them out. Oh my gosh, this new Samsung phone will work in 5G, real 5G, that sort of thing. I like to experiment.
Well, you're a creative personality, that's for sure. Where do you get your creativity from? Do you think that creativity can be taught, or is something that you have inbuilt, or you don't have it at all?
Creativity pretty much comes from encounters early in life. For one thing, it's similar. This is a totally different topic, but are you going to care about school or not care about school? Turns out when you're 8 years old, that's when it shows. You can tell which ones at 8 years old have kind of given up on school, not going to be that important, they're not going to really try hard, and then a different class that is. So entrepreneurship or creativity, you know, you have influences. You see certain TV shows and movies. You have certain conversations with friends. And sometimes they boil down to people that invent new things. My favorite books when I was very young, in elementary school even, me and a few other, I'm going to call them electronics kids, on our block, our brand new block surrounded by orchards when Silicon Valley was a real valley. And we would buy Tom Swift Jr. books and read about this young engineer who had friends and had girlfriends and had a father, and he owned a company with his father, and if there was a tragedy on Earth, he'd go into a laboratory and design and build a solution within a couple weeks. And these were our heroes, you know. Who are your heroes when you're young? You grew up thinking, gosh, if I could ever build those. And we had science fairs. Science fairs are outside of school. School usually says, you learn this, you take these tests, you have the same answers as everyone else, and we call you intelligence. But a science fair is your own project. You make it up on your own, and you create something, and it's kind of out of the ordinary and impresses people. And I had all sorts of very top winning science fair projects in the computer area. So I just felt, good, if I have an idea, you know, play a game of tic-tac-toe and never lose, build a machine that can add numbers. I could sit down with hundreds of transistors and hook wires together. I knew how to do it, and make them actually do calculations and stuff. And I just loved doing this because I was good at it, no other thing. One of the things you can do if you know...
In education, what do you think that needs to change globally in education to kids?
Get rid of grades, get rid of schools. Well, the problem is, a lot of the things that we were taught when I went to school that made you intelligent, now we have search engines, you know, and you can get all the answers so much easier. So now it's more knowing how to use the search engines, and so much of school has never been revitalized to have schools that go after results. That's because you have certification of schools. You have different curriculum that is set up by countries, by states, and you have to meet these, and they kind of have to match all these characteristics. And there's no way to start a school and be totally innovative and free and say, the students who want to go towards chemistry will always do chemistry all the time. They could be in second grade and learn all the chemistry up through the university level in 1 or 2 years if they wanted to. They need a good enough teacher. We don't have a good enough teacher yet, and artificial intelligence is never going to be that good as a human being would be. So it's hard to say. It's kind of like I'm saying, there's no real sure answers, and I try to think out of the box innovatively. And at first I thought artificial intelligence, if it got to have a personality like a human and knew everything about you and everything about the world, it could really be a good instructor. But I'm not sure I buy that anymore. When I was in 6th grade, I told my father I was going to be an electrical engineer like he was, and second to that, I was going to be a 5th grade teacher, because teachers are always important to you when you're young, certain teachers. And I kept that in my heart my whole life, which is why eventually it was after Apple's success, I had children of my own. I was in schools, and I was, of course, filling the schools with computer labs. because that's what you do if you're in technology in Silicon Valley and you have money. And I'm filling them up, and I thought, you know, if you have a lot of money, just giving money away in projects, even investing in museums and culture of my city, San Jose, even if you do that, you're giving it away, that doesn't have meaning. You give yourself. You sacrifice personal things, and I thought I should teach. Let's see if I can teach. What do I teach? How to use the computer for all the subjects you learn in school. How to apply it to do a little better job, especially presentation. We had printers by then. And I started teaching, and I had no idea how to do it. And I made up my own classes. I would never use a book. I would only write my own lessons and have the printing out, do my handouts all by myself, because that's true creativity when you do it yourself. And I taught for 8 years. 6th graders, that's like 11-year-olds. I taught 7th through 9th graders. I taught classes with teachers. I got up to 7 days a week. And this was a huge part of my life. 8 years of my life went into that. I cared about schools. California is where I taught. California, out of 50 states, was at the bottom. 50th in the nation for class size. We had the largest classes in California. 47th in the nation for dollars per student. 43rd in the nation for computers per student. Why? There had been a bit of legislation passed, a referendum, Proposition 13 had passed, and it kept property taxes from being raised, and property taxes were the main source of funding for schools. If you had a city like Cupertino, always known for good schools, as well as Apple now, Cupertino, you could have an election and raise the property taxes. So I spent the money to send a postcard to every single resident of Cupertino, and we had the vote, and we got 64% of the vote, and we lost. Proposition 13 said you had to have 2/3 supermajority. And I thought, this is an unfairness in the system. Why does a family of 2 with doesn't want to pay money for schools maybe, have as many votes as a family of 5? They only get 2 votes. The kids don't get to vote. Why do they have the same say as far as money for schools? I financed it a second year, went down in Cupertino. Finally, in my town, Los Gatos passed it, and then Cupertino passed it. And so for 30-some years, nearly 40 years, 30 years, those 2 cities in the San Francisco area have had a little bit more money for schools than the others. But it was hard to do. And you know, the trouble is, money comes from votes. In any democracy, that's just how it works. And the kids don't get to vote. But anyway, physical improvements to the schools, I don't know. Do anything you can to show every single student they're respected. And I would say, don't grade them early on, because you know what? It turns out that in early years in school, you notice these kids always have their hands up first, and they always have the best grades on tests. So I'm going to give up because I'm not one of the best. And you should try to structure your school so that for quite a while, everyone gets to find their place and what they like a lot. Someday I wish we could have the students interested in chemistry, the students interested in literature, students interested in drama, students interested in technology and adding and computers, if they could just study more of what they like and want to do and what's in their heart, and make it fun. But you know, nobody's found the formula to really do that yet. We've had charter schools and things like that try. And of course, you can put a lot of money into a private school and hire some very special teachers, but it's not for the masses.
That everybody's talking about, but it's still kind of a mystery for everyone. Do you think that it will keep on taking major roles in our everyday life? Do you think that's something that we should feel attracted to or scared of?
Oh, I definitely think we should feel attracted to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence got a real big boost with a book called Singularity by Raymond Kurzweil. I know him well. And Singularity predicted we're going to have as much information stored in our little computing devices and as much computing as the human brain by a certain date. I might even have been as early as 2024. And oh my gosh, that implied to everybody that our little machines are going to be doing what a brain does. And I bought into that. I bought into it for a while. At first I disdained it because I never thought ever a computer would equal the brain. And then I bought into it. With exponential curves like Moore's Law, things make a little change at a time, a little change, and you don't see the results early until they happen. And then all of a sudden you say, of course it was going to happen. And that's what these curves were about, amount of information in a device and processing the device equaling the brain. What if it equals the brain? And then, after I'd been talking this way for 2 to 3 years, Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, Elon Musk all came out saying, artificial intelligence is what we need to fear as humans replacing us and all this stuff. And I thought, oh good, they're joining me. And then I rethought it. I thought it out more and more. We don't know how the brain is structured. When I went back to Berkeley to get my degree, I actually took the courses for psychology majors. I studied the brain, I studied memory intensively. We don't know how the brain works. We don't know where memories are stored in the human body. The closest you'll come is something I came up with 35 years ago, which is you lose 2 things between the ages of 6 and 10. You lose your childhood autobiographic memories, and you lose your teeth. That's the closest you'll find in any book that indicates even where memories are stored. We know they're processed in the brain, but not where they're. So we don't know how a brain is wired. Just being able to get to it, being able to process as much data as the brain doesn't mean you can make a brain. I was in one company one time where the engineers figured out how to make a brain. It takes 9 months. So, artificial intelligence, the mistaken word is intelligence. People think, wow, it's going to make machines that just do all the thinking I used to do. You know what? We haven't even spoken about or thought that we'll ever make a machine that says, what should I do today? What would be a good thing for me? What would be a good thing for the world? What would help people? We're never going to have a machine that thinks that way. It's always going to be thought out by humans. What would be a good thing? And we can program a machine to play with it, to try it 1 billion times. What human being can do something 1 billion times and remember every result? You'd be very good at it, you'd be very skilled at everything. So you can show Google 80,000 pictures of dogs, and now Google can recognize a dog faster than any human being on Earth. And we don't lose our jobs because of it. We always would have. Every bit of technology is better than humans were before. Okay, but Google can't tell if it's a dog on a wall, a picture of a dog, or a real dog in front of the wall. A 1 or 2 year old infant, you point out and say, that's a dog. They just instantly know it's a thing like me. And it has limbs that are kind of soft and kind of hard, and they're flexible, and it has eyes, and it has a brain that looks around, and it goes where it wants to go. The child sees the entire picture of what a dog is. Google only sees pixels. And we fool ourselves in being able to make high-end, good computer technology. But if you think about it, every bit of computer technology, in fact, every bit of technology since the wheel, allowed humans to do more than a human could do just by themselves. It gives us superpowers, if you will. And so what we call artificial intelligence is kind of like this idea that once the machines are getting so close that they're going to start teaching themselves, and they're going to become faster learners and developers in life than a human brain. But first, you better understand how the brain really is structured and how it works. And if we knew that, we could make a brain. So I very much disdain this idea of artificial intelligence being intelligent. It's going to give us helpful things in our life, and it's going to give us probably some things that aren't so helpful, like some of the self-driving car crashes. And all it is just the highest art of things that computers can do. Replacing human beings, if there's anything unusual in the world, maybe a computer that if it knew this place here could walk around, but if somebody puts a new chair in the middle, how's it going to know the new things you don't expect? Especially on the road, speaking of self-driving cars, you have a lane blocked off, some new cones, a big handwritten sign telling you what to do. None of this artificial intelligence is going to be able to handle any of these situations that it hasn't been trained for anyway. And so I say just utilize it to help us the best we can. Oh my gosh, some time ago we developed cruise control for cars, and then we got cruise control that kept your distance from the car in front of you, which was kind of nice, made things kind of nice, and that's nice. And so obviously if we have a car that sees a red light and you're not hitting the brake, it hits the brake for you. Does things to protect you and protect others. Those are good things. Who lost a job because of it? Now, some of the jobs in society eventually, you walk into maybe you walk into a fast food place and there's a kiosk and you can order on a machine where it used to be a human taking your order. But that just means the jobs in society shift maybe towards those who maintain computers and keep them running, and robotics and assembly line moving of materials and little robots carrying things from building to building. All those sort of things are going to have a lot of jobs forever and in the future.
So, well, I'd like to pick your brain now on the current state of technology. What are the techs that you are currently watching? What are you following, thinking that there might be the next big thing?
Yes, it's almost a trick question because, like everyone in this room, I read a lot of the articles about different types of technology being developed, and some of them seem, I don't know, will this really go? Will this new kind of battery, really, have twice the distance and all that, or twice the power? Will it work out? Will it be affordable to manufacture or not? And then there's all of the major ones. We just mentioned artificial intelligence. There's Internet of Things. There's a lot of different categories. Electric vehicles, self-driving cars. A lot of these categories that we read about all the time, and everybody's on those, and once you get a consensus, it helps some of the technologies develop. I'm more interested, the technologies that wind up being interesting are who saw that coming? Who saw it coming? But I'm like everyone else. It's very unusual that you would see something coming and know how great it's going to be, like Apple was, and really know it. It's almost like the smarter you are about business, the less you see these things coming. My thing is they can be very disruptive. When something new you didn't expect comes about, even personal computers, it can be very disruptive, and ongoing companies of a decent size should probably have a group, a chief disruption officer, who is independent of the CEO, because the CEO's got to keep the company running, making money every day, and can't have conflicting ideas about what could we be working on way off in the future that doesn't make sense now, or what could competitors come up with that would affect our business. Should be a different group that reports directly to the board of directors and not really to the CEO. And it should be an independent group of people spaced in a city far from the headquarters, so that people can think more independently and not be sort of under control of what we've got to build today.
And what about the big tech companies nowadays and the power that they hold? Apple is among them, but also Google and also Amazon. What do you think about that situation in the market, and do you think that they can become more disruptive?
The position of big tech bothers me. It's hard to come up with the exact specific steps that could be taken or should be taken. It bothers me because they're almost beyond control. They're unregulated. And I, as a user, as just a human being, so often feel I'm at the mercy of decisions being made by others. I don't have as much choice as I want to have about things in my life. I grew up and you could choose from any number of brooms even. You could put it in a closet, or a vacuum cleaner, put it in a closet, and it would work the same for 40 years. And nowadays you got to worry about, oh my gosh, it's got to have this app and these phones and these computers, and it connects to such an entity through an app on the internet, in the cloud. You don't know what's going where, you don't know who's in control of it. No, we don't have enough control, and that's a lack of truth. The most important thing of everything that's good in the world is truth and honesty. And there's something dishonest if you think you have a level of security or privacy that you really don't. You've been guaranteed, you can set this privacy level, that privacy level, but the ones they don't tell you about are probably where an awful lot of your data is going. I just remember reading yesterday about my little Roku TV platform, that there are 50 different apps and channels on it that are sucking all your data, all the data out of it that they can, and you don't ever realize that. And I don't know, as a creative person, I don't want people trying to say, we know what you're going to think next, or controlling my thoughts, or knowing everything about every little action I'm taking. I don't like to be followed that closely. Yeah, I would like advertising that's sort of directed towards my needs and not others, but I still want more. There's an ethical query, and I think some of these companies should be broken up in ways that maybe they're divisions. Even Apple's so huge. Send off separate divisions, at least let them function like they were independent companies under your ownership even. As far as Google and Facebook, what they do is just untenable to me. I mean, everybody thinks Google is Gmail and Facebook is Friends, and those are great things. They do a great job at it, but it's really all their business is advertising and letting people know, how they can approach you, just like spam, to get sales. And I don't like that. We can't ever seem to cut down the spam, the robocalls, all this. So, yeah, so big technology, I worry about them just having too much power to make every decision themselves and not be accountable or questioned.
Let's see what happens in the future. What will the future bring? Well, Steve, I'd like to share with you some of the questions from our audience now. They're asking some of the things that we've been talking about before, but I'd like to share with you some others that I think that are really interesting. So Marco here is asking, he's asking if you could give some advice for the young entrepreneurs.
Yes. Young entrepreneurs can still be within a company and be young, but I've already stated that, startups are the most fun thing you can do in the world, but do respect the elements that you need. And I've mentioned business, I've mentioned marketing, I mentioned engineering coming from our start of Apple. And those are kind of three basic ones. You really should include them all when you're coming up with the idea of what your business is about. It shouldn't only be a businessman. I can write a business plan. I can submit it to venture capital. I can get funded for my idea, and then I can go hire these smart engineers who think of everything, and know how to solve things and take shortcuts and add pieces for almost nothing and do things different. Don't include them in thinking out the original plan is a mistake. So be sure to honor the engineers. But the engineers should look back and say, I honor the thinking of the marketing people and the business people. You should really have people that work together. I've often proposed that we take the little personality chart in forming a group in a company. I discussed it. Rather than hiring for certain skill sets to get the job done, make sure everybody takes a personality test, kind of like dating sites, and they're all going to get along, the people that work together. Every time I talk to somebody, my own kid or other people, they got a job and they love it. They love the people they work with. And when they don't like their job, they just don't like some of the people they work with. It's just a missed part of business. But it's an important part. It's more the touching, sentimental, humanist part, the emotional part, rather than just plain old business. We got to have this team to make a product to make money.
Here's another interesting question from Claudia. She wants to know your opinion on how do you think that the role that technology will have in the society of the future. How will technology affect in the evolution of society?
You know what? I'm a pro-technologist because that's where I come from, and I value it highly, and I see so many needs of, just companies, business, of life using technology in the future. So being a technologist, I think, is very, very lucky if you like it. You better like it. Don't ever go in a way you don't like. And technology there are companies that have, just hundreds and even thousands of requisitions out to hire engineers with certain skills like moving materials around, processing of materials and things like that. So it's a very safe thing to recommend, but not for everyone. If somebody doesn't like it right away and somehow they even love literature and reading, that's what you should help them go in the direction they want to. Don't force your values on other people. Technology is a high value of mine, but I wouldn't want to force it on everybody. I would want to make it available. Now, what's going to attract somebody to any type of learning? You're only attracted if it's fun for you. If you feel excited, I'm doing something new, different, I'm learning. So somehow we've got to figure out how to make technology fun. Some of the new kits, little Raspberry Pis, learning the computer technology, how to program, come up with your own ideas and create your own little programs. Very different than just answering questions on a math test. But it's really intriguing enough to pull people into this. I know actually the number of people that are going to universities in the United States in technology is actually declining. But the demand is still very high.
Carlos here has a question about creativity and knowing when and long in such a competitive industry.
I don't really get involved in operations at Apple and the big business. I'm kind of too outgoing, too honest for that. So how do you stay at the top of your game? One of the things that I did notice, or especially early days,
being flexible, noticing that the market is somewhere else and jumping on it early and not being late and being willing to, not say, we can hold back and make our BlackBerry phones or our Nokia phones. We can make them and our business is going to be affected a bit by the iPhone. And we'll make them for another year and it won't be affected in another year, another year, another year. But then 5 years later, all of a sudden, we missed the whole trend and the whole world. We put ourselves in, our brand is associated not with these phones that are screens. So you don't want to miss out. You want to jump early into where the future is going and coming. If you're a large enough company, you have lots of chances to acquire the brilliant young people coming out of universities, whatever, developing products that will really help and are going to wind up being those ones that not everybody can judge right away, but this is something that would make the world a much better, greater place. And so that's why there's a lot of acquisitions. Facebook acquired Oculus for, $1 billion and acquired Android for what in the end became something like that. It's worth doing. You don't want to miss the big bets on the future.
That's interesting. Well, Aldo wants to know if you could share some of your greatest personal or professional lessons in life, those that really changed you and that were like a touch point for you.
My personal what?
Experiences, like lessons.
Oh, my gosh. I would go back, it would take way too long to describe in this sort of time. I was just building electronic projects my whole life, and it was almost always some electronic thing I created. Of course, I think about my life. In high school, I had all the top grades and the top college entrance exams, and I had taught myself in an age when you could never get a book on how computers were built. I had taught myself by trying and struggling on paper how to design computers out of chips, and I got to where I could design any computer that was made then in 2 days. And you'd say, oh my gosh, you should go to MIT. You're just way ahead of the world. And I flew out with some friends to the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. And when we were there, it snowed that day. And it was the first time ever in my life to be in snow. And it just took my heart, and I wouldn't apply to any other college. So follow your heart, is one of those things. That's a memory, and I had the most incredible year of school there. I spoke about it ever since. 2 of my own children wound up going there at points in their college career. And so that was very touched by the heart. Obviously, it was kind of cool. I think of a lot of my innovations with the Apple II computer, saying that a computer should not talk to a display, an input-output device. The computer should be the input-output device. One time I walked into a bowling alley, long before Apple even, or a few years before. I walked into a bowling alley and there was a machine with a TV called Pong, little TV. And I was just amazed. Oh my gosh, a TV could be an output to a computer. I had wanted my own computer. I had told my dad in high school, I'm going to own my own computer someday. I thought of ways if I could put signals into a device called an oscilloscope, could I draw words and numbers on it and make it a computer output device, because I couldn't afford any printer of the day. It would cost as much, a teletype would cost as much as 2 cars. Never be able to afford it. And I saw the screen. I said, oh my gosh, you can use your own TV. And I went home, and over the next week or so, I designed 28 little $1 chips, and it would play Pong. I didn't invent Pong. It played Pong on my own TV. And then I got this hired by Atari to design Breakout, where you hit the ball against the bricks. And how was, it's like these were events I'll never forget. Now, to do Breakout, Steve Jobs needed money quick. This should have been a many months job to design a product out of hardware. But instead of using 150 chips like Atari, I was so good, I only had 50 chips. And I didn't think we could do it. I had to do it in 4 days and nights. Steve Jobs needed some money to buy into a commune, I guess now. So I said, okay, I'll try it. I went 4 days without sleeping. 4 days no sleep. And I just worked and worked, and my head floats. When you're sleeping, your head goes off in different directions. And I know how color TVs were made from the analog days. I could be a TV repairman with waves on wires called sine waves. And they mix the red and the blue and the green, expensive parts in a big device. You have to do calculus to design it. And it would cost like $5,000 to put color onto a TV. And then while I was sitting there with my head going off another direction, I thought, wait a minute, what if I took a little number out of a computer? Took the number right out of somewhere. The number, let's say the number is 6. 6 is 0, 1, 1, 0 in computer talk. 6 in our talk. 0, 1, 1, 0. And if 0's go on a wire and 1's go on a wire, it goes up and down. I figured out if it goes up and down at the right rate, every television would think it was color, even though it didn't follow the mathematics of color TV that was in all the engineering books. It was something that had never ever been done before. And I'll never forget coming up with that inspiration. That really led to the Apple II computer, and our first Apple logo was 6 colors for a reason. Because nobody else would figure out how to do color for $0. And it worked. But who would know? You're scared. This is so different than anything ever before. But I did that all the time. I tried things that just ways that had never been done before. So deliberately thinking out of the box, you might say.
Well, that's the most important thing, to maintain yourself as a creative person and keep on innovating. Now that we're talking about memories, I think we just have time for 2 more questions, but I'd like to bring this one up. This one's from Diego. He wants to know if you remember your last conversation with Steve Jobs.
Yes, I do. And it's a little sad to relate. He was a couple of weeks before his death, and he was reminiscing on the old days and how much fun they were. And, you know, he said he wasn't going to be around that much longer. And I thought he was just tired. He's out of work. He's not working. He's lamenting that he has so many things to contribute and he's not there. And my advice to him was that you're not judged on what you don't do when you're gone. You're judged on what you did while you were here. You're the finest CEO, technology CEO of all time, you know. And I even thank you for products I have in my own life. I remember saying that to him. And I didn't remember he was trying to say that he was very close to death. So I was even surprised the day that it happened. And a bit in tears. It's very, very sad loss to the world.
It was for all. Here's my last question for you. I'd like to know, what is there left for you to achieve? What do you dream for the future, and how would you like to be remembered?
Well, it's funny. I don't necessarily dream that way. I just want to do what I love doing the way I always have in my life. I do want to be remembered as a good person, you know, that cared about young people especially more than anything else. But being nice to all people, just being nice to everyone, and caring about everyone, accepting them even if they're different than I am in a lot of ways. And being that kind of person, even with this huge business success and accomplishment that you might say, that'd probably be a big memory. I have a slight bucket list, and I don't have very many items on it, but one of them is to refresh my Spanish, go back to school again, and another is to let's see. Another is to go to a few places I've never been to. And I got to 2 of those places last year, so I'm not sure there's any left.
There's always something left to
do. Refresh my Spanish and run a marathon again.
Okay.
Maybe even ski again, but we'll see.
Okay, well, hope you get there, of course. And
Thanks.
well, thank you so much, Steve, for being with us, for joining us today. Thank you also for changing all of our lives. You are a part of our everyday lives. So
I'm so glad for that. Every time I see it, everywhere.
thank you so much.
Good.
Big applause.